Coming up, the worst Atlantic storm in a decade strikes the Caribbean while Florida holds its breath. The man tipped by some as the next Prime Minister and his controversial comments on abortion. And a new frontier for chocoholics, the pink invention that's the first new variety in 80 years. The swirling mass of Irma powers on toward the United States. Desperate efforts are made in the Caribbean to protect lives, homes and businesses. In Florida, a mandatory evacuation is ordered.
2 people booked £12,000 flights when I walked out reception at midday today, because it's that serious.
Also this lunchtime, a public sector pay cap protest outside Parliament and sharp exchanges inside between May and Corbyn. The father of murdered Aisha, who warned his daughter was in danger, speaks of his anger at being ignored. And it's chocolate, but not as we know it. A new taste and colour, but is it nice?
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. On some of the Caribbean islands, they're not sure how bad things are or how bad they will get because Irma has already destroyed their weather stations. On the ground, it's pretty obvious. What's looking like the region's most powerful and devastating hurricane in more than a decade has swept across the Leeward Islands, ripping all in its path. Next, the dream holiday islands of the Caribbean and ultimately the wealthy, glitzy coastline of Florida. There, they are taking no risks. A mandatory evacuation has been ordered. We're live from Florida in a moment, but first Dan Rivers on Irma's frightening progress.
Dawn and the first images and sounds of Irma's terrifying ferocity on St Martin show the world what's heading in from the Atlantic. A storm so colossal it's visible from space. This swirling weather system is now a Category 5 hurricane, so powerful it's being picked up by equipment designed to measure earthquakes. For the islands in its path, preparations and fear. People are already stocking up.
Only 2.
Yep.
Thank you.
Drinking water is being rationed ahead of the winds, which are expected to gust to 185 miles an hour.
Batten down the hatches, put everything away, get everything in the freezers that possibly can. I mean, that's about all you can do, and pray for the best. It doesn't look too good, though.
On US TV, the warnings are getting ever more dire.
And we are going to start with this breaking news on Hurricane Irma. This is the fiercest storm ever recorded in the Atlantic Ocean. Words like devastating, catastrophic, and monster being used to describe this storm.
Now tourists across the Caribbean are heeding the advice to get out, but it's not easy.
Everybody's panicking, everybody's organising private jets. Literally, that was what instigated me, definitely trying to get any flight for any cost. 2 people booked £12,000 flights when I walked out reception at midday today, because it's that serious.
On the island of St Martin, the storm surge has already started, but much worse is expected as Irma closes in.
The storm is massive, and the storm surge is predicted will go for miles and miles. In some instances, it could cover homes and go very far inland.
The latest predictions show Irma battering its way across Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Haiti and Cuba, and then possibly heading towards Florida, where mandatory evacuations are taking place. For the islands that people can't or won't leave, they're boarding up and battening down, ready for the hurricane that's growing more intense with each passing day. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
And our correspondent Martin Geisler is live in Miami for us now. Martin, we saw lots of concern in Dan's report. What is your sense of just how worried people there are?
Well, they are concerned, Alistair, as you would imagine, because they're watching those pictures that you've just seen in Dan's report, and they're seeing the buffeting and battering that these Caribbean islands are getting, and they know that's heading for them. That sense of foreboding is only going to intensify in the coming days, because those pictures are going to become wall to wall, and the hurricane is going to get ever closer. It's moving at about 15, 16 miles an hour at the moment, and most of the trackers suggest it is heading absolutely this way. You heard that news anchor in Dan's report using some pretty extreme vocabulary. Devastating, catastrophic, monster storm, potentially life-threatening. Now that is extreme vocabulary, but it is not hyperbole. That is exactly how intense this storm is. It's 25 years since Miami was hit by a Category 5. That was Hurricane Andrew, and it was devastating for this part of the country. Hurricane Irma is 420 miles across, the cone of the hurricane that they talk about. Florida is only 140 miles across. So if these tracker projections are right, and it does slam into Miami on Sunday, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday morning, whenever it comes, it could cover the whole of Florida, coast to coast, meaning that this place is hit not just by extreme winds, but also by a massive storm surge, 10 to 20 feet swells in the sea. So people are stocking up and battening down here, and rightly so.
Martin, thank you. Here, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn clashed over the public sector pay cap in the first Prime Minister's question time after the summer break. While MPs cheered and jeered in the chamber, outside hundreds of nurses protested about their pay. And as the Prime Minister was still answering questions, the PCS union, which represents some civil servants, announced that it is balloting its members on whether to strike. Well, our political correspondent Carl Dinnan joins me live now from Westminster. Did you sense any hints there, Carl, that the government might relent?
Well, the Prime Minister still left plenty of room for her to do so at a future date. And of course, for those nurses demonstrating outside here today and for all the other public sector workers who are waiting for this pay cap to be lifted, every time that happens, their hopes are raised, especially nurses in London who might think that they would be the first beneficiaries of any lifting of the pay cap. But of course, the Prime Minister isn't going to announce that in answer to a question from Jeremy Corbyn at Prime Minister's Questions, although he was on strong ground today, pushing the Prime Minister on that public sector pay cap.
NHS staff are 14% worse off than they were 7 years ago. Is she really happy that NHS staff use food banks? Warm words don't pay food bills.
What he does is consistently stand up and ask for more money to be spent on this, that and the other. Now, he can do that in opposition. The problem with Labour is that they do it in government as well.
Now, the Prime Minister may face criticism for appearing to refer to NHS staff as this, that or the other. Of course, that's not what she meant. The important point is she did say the pay framework for next year is yet to be set and, in her words, will be fair both towards the people who pay for the public sector and towards public sector workers themselves.
And one of the men tipped to possibly replace the Prime Minister has got himself into hot water with his comments over abortion.
Yes, this is Jacob Rees-Mogg, the very smart and indefatigably old-fashioned MP who was a surprise tip to replace Theresa May over the summer. He is also a devout Catholic, and today he was asked about his views on abortion on Good Morning Britain, and this is how it went.
Are you completely opposed to abortion in all circumstances?
Yes, I am.
Rape and incest?
Sexual violence?
I'm afraid so.
Really?
Life is sacrosanct and begins at the point of conception. And I think it is wrong.
So if a woman is raped, say you were Prime Minister, and a woman is raped by a family member, right? You would say she had absolutely no right to have that baby aborted?
No, she would have a right under UK law.
Yeah, but you wouldn't agree with that, right?
But that law is not going to change.
No, but what's your personal opinion?
My personal opinion is that life begins at the point of conception and abortion is morally indefensible.
You would make...
Now, I don't think that will do his leadership chances, such as they ever were, a great deal of good. Although, of course, abortion is a matter of conscience for MPs, as the Prime Minister's spokesman pointed out afterwards, although Mrs May does not agree, he said, with Mr Rees-Mogg.
Carl, thank you. And as if that wasn't all bad enough for the Tories to contend with, the government's been forced to defend the contents of a leaked document which would cut the number of low-skilled workers entering from the EU after Brexit. While the proposals will have pleased many who voted to leave, Labour said the move spells an extreme hard Brexit. Well, the Prime Minister said controlled immigration was what people wanted. Sergio Carrier has the details and the reaction.
This report offers the most detailed insight yet into the government's thinking on the politically charged issue of immigration post-Brexit. It proposes slamming the door on thousands of unskilled EU workers and instead refocusing efforts on British jobs for British workers, while ending freedom of movement when we end our existing relationship with the EU. The Defence Secretary wouldn't be drawn on commenting on this leaked document, but did say,
"We don't want to shut the door, people bringing their skills and making their contribution to Britain. Equally, we want more British companies to invest in the British workforce, to train up their workers, to make sure we have a better skilled workforce for them to draw on. So we have to strike the right balance."
Some of the ideas in this report leaked to The Guardian are a cap on the number of unskilled workers from the EU, introducing a salary and skills threshold, and new restrictions on workers' rights to bring family members into the UK. Plans that will be welcomed by many Brexit voters, but London's Mayor Sadiq Khan said all EU workers were vital to the economy.
Not simply higher skilled talent for the financial sector, for the tech sector, but also lower skilled workers from the EU, for the construction sector, for hospitality, for social care. And if the government is determined to have an extreme hard Brexit, it will lead to all sorts of problems.
This lunchtime, at the first Prime Minister's questions after the summer break, Theresa May insisted it was the low earners that will be helped by a curb in immigration numbers.
We continue to believe as a government that it's important to have net migration at sustainable levels. We believe that to be the tens of thousands, because of the impact particularly it has on people at the lower end of the income scale in depressing their wages.
While not official policy, the leaking of these proposals could increase tensions between the EU and the UK at crucial negotiations next month that will decide whether talks on a trade deal can begin. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
Still ahead on the ITV Lunchtime News, the crippling condition that affects 1.5 million women but often goes undiagnosed for years. And the secret behind pink chocolate, the first new variety in 80 years. But first, 5 of the 6 men charged following an investigation into the Hillsborough disaster and its aftermath are appearing in a Crown Court for the first time today. Damon Green is live outside Preston Crown Court for us this lunchtime. So, Damon, bring us up to date. What's been happening so far today?
Well, as you say, 28 years after the Hillsborough disaster, and this was the first time that 5 men have appeared in the dock of a Crown Court together, charged with offences relating to it. Sir Norman Betterson arrived here at Preston this morning. He is charged with 4 charges of misconduct in public office, and families of the 96 Hillsborough victims also arrived to be present in court to see him, joined by Graham McCrell, the former safety officer at Sheffield Wednesday, 2 South Yorkshire police officers, former officers, Donald Denton and Alan Foster, and the former South Yorkshire police solicitor Peter Metcalfe. One person who wasn't here today was David Duckenfield, the former match commander at Hillsborough. He was, however, represented by a lawyer, and there was a lot of legal argument here today. 2 questions to be decided: where this trial could potentially take place and in what manner. We understand there'll be more than one trial, 2, possibly more. The judge says he cannot decide that at this stage, but as to where the trial will take place, here at Preston or some other courtroom, he'll say that at 2:15 this afternoon.
Damon, thank you. Next this lunchtime, the rarely talked about crippling condition that affects more than 1.5 million women but often goes undiagnosed for years. The NHS health watchdog NICE said that women wait an average of 7.5 years before being diagnosed with endometriosis. Symptoms include chronic pelvic pain, the painful periods that stop women taking part in normal activities. The condition affects an estimated 1 in 10 women of reproductive age, but despite that large number of sufferers, 40% said that they had seen a doctor 10 times before finally being diagnosed. Well, I'm delighted to be joined live in the studio by Claire Barker, who ended up having surgery after years without being diagnosed and now blogs about the condition. Bluntly, what was worse, the symptoms, the suffering, or just not knowing what was causing it all?
I think it was just not knowing, to be honest with you. for myself, I waited 14 years from first going to the GP about my symptoms to having a diagnosis. And I'd say about probably 6 of those years before the diagnosis,
was there even an element of get a grip, sort yourself out, these things happen, it's the woman's time and all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, there absolutely was. And if you're told constantly again and again that something's, in your head and that you're fine, you really start to question yourself and think, maybe this is in my head and maybe I do need to pull myself together and maybe all women go through this.
Yeah. As I said, you blog about it, so it's not only your own personal experiences, but you're in constant conversation with other folk. You've looked at the NICE guidelines. They talk about the organisation of care, symptoms, signs, diagnosing and drug treatment and what have you. How do you score those guidelines? Is it a major step forward or a nudge?
I definitely say it's a major step forward in the right direction. Fundamentally, it's saying that women need to be listened to. That's going to improve diagnosis much, much quicker, hopefully, with GPs. It says that, constant chronic pelvic pain is not normal. That's something that isn't really understood and picked up early on these days. And also then, it's really advising on the care pathway all the way through then. And I think that's really going to improve things.
Final thought, some of the women we were talking, when we were discussing it up in the newsroom beforehand, were saying the psychological effect of it as well as the physical is as much a problem. Is that dealt with?
I think that's something that the guidelines don't address as much, actually. That's not picked up on because endometriosis has a massive psychological impact for women. It's a massive deal. It affects every aspect of women's lives, and that's something where, there really does need to be support as well.
Okay. Great to meet you, and thank you for your candour and for your support for other people out there. Thank you. Now, you can find a guide to endometriosis, its symptoms, and what you can do about it on our website. Just search online for ITV News. Yesterday, we featured the story of Aisha Jane Smith, who was murdered by her own mother despite warnings that she was in danger. Serious Case Review found that social workers missed signs that the 20-month-old was at risk. Well, today, the little girl's father has said that he blames the council for her death. Carolyn Sim reports.
The Serious Case Review said Aisha Jane's death couldn't have been predicted, but mistakes had been made. The toddler's father and grandmother say the warning signs that they had told social services about should have been investigated, but they were ignored. Pictures of marks on Aisha's face were taken and they reported bruising to her leg.
Took pictures of that as well and I reported them, but still they were just umming and ahhing down the phone. He never come out to see the pictures or ask me to take them down to him. It was just, I'll look into it. And if it weren't that, then he wouldn't answer the phone to me.
Aisha Jane was just 21 months old when her mother, Catherine Smith, murdered her in the bedroom of their flat in Burton in May 2014. She'd been in a violent relationship with the boyfriend she lived with, but despite years of contact with social services, her daughter's care wasn't scrutinised. The report published yesterday found there was a failure to re-evaluate how Aisha was being cared for. Social workers showed a lack of professional curiosity and didn't challenge the mother enough. They were inclined to take what she said at face value. The danger Aisha was in wasn't recognised.
If the right steps had been taken at the right time, AJ would have been here. She wouldn't be out of our lives now.
Yesterday, Derbyshire Council accepted the report's findings, saying there were opportunities for practice to have been stronger.
There were opportunities with Aisha Jane that weren't taken in the way that we would want them to.
Ricky Booth is left living with the frustration and anger that more could have been done for his daughter. Carolyn Sim, ITV News.
A murder investigation has been launched after a 14-year-old boy was shot in Newham in East London. Corey Jr. Davis was shot in the head on Monday afternoon and died from his injuries late last night. Another 17-year-old boy who was also shot has suffered potentially life-changing injuries and is recovering in hospital. No arrests have yet been made. Labour Party says it would ban betting companies from sponsoring football shirts if it gets into government. Deputy Leader Tom Watson said it would help tackle what he described as the hidden epidemic of gambling addiction. 9 out of 20 Premier League football clubs, including West Ham, Newcastle and Everton, currently have shirt sponsorship deals with betting firms. And Ryanair is scrapping its policy of allowing non-priority passengers to carry 2 pieces of hand luggage. From November, only small bags will be allowed in the cabin, with wheelie bags being placed in the hold free of charge. The company claimed it's because flights are being delayed over a lack of space in overhead lockers. Finally this lunchtime, if you think you know your chocolate, you might have to think again. 80 years after the launch of white chocolate, chocolatiers claim to have discovered a new variety. Ruby, named after the cocoa bean from which it is derived, is pink in colour, as you can see. It is naturally berry-favoured. It won't surprise you to hear that its manufacturers are calling it a sensual delight. But what do you think about it? I'm delighted to be joined now by Angus Kennedy from the magazine Kennedy's Confection. In the absence of my wife, you are the expert. Rate it.
Well, it tastes quite good, but the only thing about this chocolate is that the strapline that goes with this one is that we are going to be experiencing the chocolate without the experience of the price tag, which denotes, I think, for the more hedonistic taste. And it came out with all these sort of things which I didn't quite understand when it was launched, but I think it's got to be all in the taste. I think when you're eating something especially chocolate, it goes down quite fast.
They also say it's a fundamentally different taste.
Yeah.
It isn't.
It's basically chocolate that happens to be a ruby colour or pink. And what will be interesting is how the consumers take that and translate it themselves, because the eyes really, that's how they're going to decide. It's going to be them that decide what it's going to be like.
I mean, it is curious. You're talking about the sensual thing. I mean, it does look, that's broken up, but when we've seen the other pictures of it in beautiful shapes and what have you, it does look sensational.
It does. It kind of looks like a sort of, a gemstone. You kind of gaze into it and see if it's going to give you a new experience. But I think it is a breakthrough in the fact that it's got this colour which is natural.
Yes.
So the centre of the beans are purple, which is quite interesting. And the taste is quite different. Whether or not we're going to call it the fourth chocolate, I don't know. I'm just a bit too much a cynic.
But in the modern era, that point about it being a natural pink, red, ruby berry is crucial.
Yeah.
Because a lot of folk out there, Mrs. S included, who I mentioned at the beginning, don't like the additive side of it. They like their chocolate pure.
Exactly. And the nice thing about this chocolate is you don't mathematician, so we don't have to work out, is this like a 69%, a 23%? No, it's just ruby chocolate. I quite like that. We can go back to basics, enjoy our chocolate and enjoy ourselves, which is the most important thing to do in life.
Final very quick thought, milkshakes as well, bickies, cakes, cookies?
I think so. I can see it going everywhere, but it's got to go with a glass of champagne for me. That's it. That's why I've got 5 kids.
After the programme. Good to see you. Thank you so much. And that is it this lunchtime. Mary Nightingale will be here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather. But for now, from all of us, a very good afternoon and take care. Bye-bye.
Chocolate and enjoy ourselves, which is the most important thing to do in life.
Final very quick thought, milkshakes as well, bickies, cakes, cookies?
I think so. I can see it going everywhere, but it's got to go with a glass of champagne for me. That's it. That's why I've got 5 kids.
After the programme. Good to see you. Thank you so much. And that is it this lunchtime. Mary Nightingale will be here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather. But for now, from all of us, a very good afternoon and take care. Bye-bye.